"She's mine at the office," Derek said with a crooked grin, his voice loud enough to pierce through the clink of wine glasses and the soft murmur of jazz in the ballroom. "Ask anyone. She practically forgets she's married from 9 to 5. The laughter that followed hit like broken glass to the face. And the worst part? My wife laughed too. Not a polite chuckle. A full-throated, tilt-your-head-back cackle. The kind she used to save for our private jokes. That sound used to mean something. I didn't throw my drink. Didn't walk over. Didn't demand an apology. That would have given him what he wanted, confirmation. Instead, I set down my champagne flute, adjusted my cuff, and quietly walked out to the terrace like I just needed fresh air. I took out my phone, dialed a number I hadn't called in months, and said 4 words, ready to move forward. If you're wondering why I didn't explode, why I didn't make a scene, it's because I already knew. I knew about the texts he sent her during our anniversary dinner. I knew about the little joke gifts on her desk, the ones she called inside jokes. I knew about the Marriott receipts tucked in with our utility bills like a forgotten cigarette in a priest's robe. I'd spent months pretending to be oblivious, letting her build a wall out of lies while I quietly drafted the blueprints to tear it all down. And if you've made it this far, I need to ask, take a second and hit that subscribe button. More than 90% of people hear these stories and never do. But that one click? It helps my team keep exposing the things most people want to keep hidden. Back inside, they had moved on to posing for photos. Derek stood behind her, his hand a little too familiar on her waist. She didn't flinch. He leaned down and whispered something that made her grin, teeth and all. Then she turned and saw me standing at the doorway. Just watching. Not angry. Not sad. Just quiet. That's what scared her. Because when I'm quiet, I'm planning. And what I'd planned was going to make that little work husband nickname the last joke he ever told in this company. I wasn't a nobody. I wasn't just Dave, her husband. They never read my resume. They never asked about the small scar under my chin or why Elizabeth Kane, the keynote speaker for the night, paused her speech to give me a nod from the podium. Derek didn't notice. He was too busy drinking on the company's dime and basking in attention he didn't earn. But his boss did. His boss saw the nod. And that's when the foundation started to shift beneath them, so subtly they didn't realize it until it cracked. By the time dessert was served, I was already speaking to Elizabeth. Not in passing, not as an admirer. We were seated at a small corner table, far from the clatter, far from the cameras. She leaned in. I leaned back. She smiled. I didn't. Her hand landed gently on my shoulder. Not flirtatious, not dramatic. Respectful. Familiar. Derek saw it. Saw everything. He nudged his manager, eyes flicking toward me like a nervous intern realizing he emailed a spreadsheet to the wrong distribution list. "We have a problem," he whispered. His boss raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" What he meant was that the man he had been mocking for 6 months, the invisible husband, the punchline, the awkward extra at company parties, was now in a quiet, intense conversation with the woman who personally signs off on every C-level hiring recommendation in their region. What he didn't know yet was that I wasn't just having a conversation. I was unsealing the box. The one I had packed 5 years ago when I left my position as senior counsel at Monroe and Brigg. The one I kept locked, not because I was done with power, but because my wife once asked me to let her have the spotlight for a while. So I did. I stepped back. Let her shine. Let her colleagues think I was just the guy who knew how to make a mean risotto and pick a decent bottle of wine. Now, that kindness was ammunition. And Derek? He had no idea I was about to use it. Derek wasn't a particularly observant man, but he knew when he was out of his depth. And that moment hit him like a crack in his wine glass. Silent at first, then spreading fast. He'd been riding high all evening, basking in the glow of his own arrogance, playing king of the office social ladder. But when he saw Elizabeth Kane, the Elizabeth Kane, lean in, nod thoughtfully, and place a hand on my shoulder, something in him shifted. Not just fear, recognition. A predator realizing he's not at the top of the food chain after all. He muttered something to his manager. The guy was half drunk on Merlot and social climbing. "We have a problem," Derek said under his breath, eyes still locked on me like a man trying to remember where he buried the body. The manager blinked, clueless. "What do you mean?" But Derek didn't answer right away. He watched as Elizabeth handed me her card. Watched me tuck it into my inner pocket like it wasn't the live grenade it was. His gaze darted around the room, trying to do the math, trying to figure out how the guy he thought was just a tag-along spouse ended up in a deep conversation with a woman who regularly rewrote hiring hierarchies for Fortune 500 firms. And me? I didn't even glance in his direction. That would have given him clarity. I preferred uncertainty. It's more corrosive. What Derek didn't know was that Elizabeth wasn't just an old colleague. She was the reason I'd once been offered partner at Monroe and Brigg before I turned it down. She taught me everything I needed to navigate executive politics, and more importantly, how to weaponize silence. When I called her earlier that evening, I didn't ask for a favor. I reminded her of one she still owed me. Something about a non-disclosure settlement from 2016 that could have ended her career. I covered for her, saved her neck. She hadn't forgotten. So when she saw me at the gala, when I gave her the nod, she stood up mid-conversation and made her way to me like gravity itself had shifted. That wasn't a gesture. It was a signal. To Derek, it looked like small talk. To everyone else who mattered, it was a chessboard moving. My wife noticed too, though she pretended not to. I saw the way her laugh faltered, just slightly, when she caught us in the corner. Saw how her eyes narrowed, not with jealousy, but with calculation. She was trying to remember if she had ever mentioned Elizabeth to Derek. If the dots could connect. If the fuse was already lit. Meanwhile, Derek paced by the bar, suddenly too sober for his own comfort. He tapped at his phone, checking Slack, then company LinkedIn, then back to his manager again. Seriously, do you know who that guy is? The manager shrugged. She said he used to be an attorney or something. Did construction law, I think. That part always made me laugh. Construction law. It was the cover story I'd used for years. Simple, unglamorous, intentionally vague. It made me sound like the kind of guy who gets excited about cement mix ratios and zoning codes. People nodded and changed the subject. Exactly how I liked it. Back inside, the program had shifted. Speeches, promotions, a toast to the exceptional growth the company had seen in Q2, while conveniently skipping the questionable bonus structure Derek had helped build. He beamed like a prom king. But when the applause died down, Elizabeth took the stage for her keynote. She didn't look at him. Not once. Instead, midway through her address, she paused. "There's someone here tonight I owe more than I can ever repay," she said. "Someone whose counsel, both legal and personal, has changed the course of more than one career, including mine." That was all she said. No name. But 3 tables turned to look at me. Derek's manager leaned in. Did she just mean? Derek didn't answer. He was already pulling up Google on his phone, searching David Ellison plus Monroe and Brigg, fingers shaking. That's when it clicked. His eyes met mine across the room. And I smiled. Not a smirk. Not a challenge. Just the calm, tired smile of a man who's already packed the parachute, checked the altimeter, and is waiting for the right moment to push someone out of the plane. And that moment? It was coming sooner than he thought. They used to call me the ghost. Not to my face, of course. To each other. In Slack threads, under breath at the coffee station, over whiskey at hotel bars during offsites. Her husband's nice enough, Derek had once joked. Probably stays home baking bread and writing gardening blogs. Another time he called me Mr. Houseplant, a nod to how I supposedly just sat in the background, soaking in the sun and offering nothing. And honestly, that was fine by me. I had no desire to be in their world. Cubicle politics and fake smiles. All-hands meetings filled with buzzwords like synergy and vertical integration. I didn't need that circus. I'd already done my time in the trenches, litigation, arbitration, internal investigations, NDAs so tight they'd make the Pentagon blush. But after the health scare, I made a decision. Step back. Let her shine. She had the fire then, the ambition. She needed room to move up. I gave it to her. What I didn't expect was for her to mistake that generosity for absence. She once said, "It's just easier when people don't know what you used to do. They get intimidated." I didn't argue, but I did start noticing how she let people mislabel me. How she stopped correcting them when they said I dabbled in law or used to work in compliance. She never mentioned that I once sat in closed-door strategy meetings with general counsel from some of the biggest firms in the Northeast. That Elizabeth Kane didn't just know me. She mentored me, fought alongside me, and once admitted I was the only reason she didn't burn out completely. Tonight, that silence broke. Derek's little empire was built on a false sense of security. He thought I was irrelevant, a harmless prop in the background of his flirtations. But when he saw Elizabeth's speech, when he heard her vaguely thank someone for shaping the ethical foundations of her career, when he saw her eyes land on me afterward and stay there, that security turned to static. He kept Googling. David Ellison Monroe and Brigg. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Then he found it. An archived page, still indexed by an old firm's website. A quote from Elizabeth. "No one understands ethical litigation strategy like David Ellison. He's the definition of quiet power." Quiet power. That phrase haunted Derek the rest of the night. His manager hovered behind him. What is it? Derek didn't respond. Just kept scrolling. Buried in the digital dust of old press releases and board filings was my name. Attached to compliance training manuals, executive policy frameworks, even a consulting white paper on misuse of corporate expense accounts. He read that last one twice. Meanwhile, I was having another glass of wine at the corner table. Alone. Watching. He looked like someone who had just realized the security camera had been on the whole time. And while he spun in mental circles trying to piece it all together, I was already orchestrating the next move. Because Derek never knew that I still held consulting access under a separate legal identity. A favor Elizabeth arranged, tucked into a back-end contract for periodic policy review. She offered to remove it after I stepped down. I told her to leave it in, just in case. Tonight was the case. Back at home, in a folder buried beneath 6 years of dust, were the original draft documents for the company's ethical conduct policies. Guess who helped structure them? Guess who baked in specific clauses about persistent, inappropriate workplace familiarity, unprofessional digital communication, and non-client-related travel reimbursements? Guess who helped his wife understand the language when she was asked to review it before signing? That's the irony of all this. She knew I had a hand in shaping the rules. She just never thought I'd use them. By the time the gala ended, Derek looked like a man walking out of a casino, realizing the house always wins. Only this time, the house was me. The quiet one. The ghost. The guy whose resume they never bothered to read. But the board? HR? Elizabeth? They were reading it now. It started with a favor. That's how it always starts. 3 years ago, she'd come home from work late, dropped her laptop bag on the counter, and sighed like she was Atlas holding up the world. They want me to weigh in on this new vendor policy, she said. Some legal jargon in here is above my pay grade. Mind taking a look? I was sipping scotch. She was still in heels. Just a glance, she added. I'll owe you dinner. What she handed me wasn't just a draft. It was a skeleton key. A half-finished ethics clause being rushed through legal for executive signatures. It covered all the predictable stuff: vendor kickbacks, client favoritism, procurement bias. But what it lacked was teeth. Language. Definitions. Clarity. So I gave it teeth. I didn't tell her what I changed. I just marked it up, cleaned up the language, and added 3 paragraphs near the end. Paragraph 9, workplace conduct with external stakeholders. Paragraph 10, internal professional boundaries. Paragraph 11, clause on behavior likely to create perception of impropriety, specifically referencing non-client travel with employees of different rank without documented business need, and frequent personal communications on internal messaging platforms unrelated to task completion. She skimmed it. Wow, you're good at this, she said. I smiled and handed it back. Just trying to make your company better. She didn't know I kept a copy. Flash forward to now, Derek grinning with wine-stained teeth at the gala, calling her his in front of a crowd of colleagues. My wife not flinching, not correcting him. The fake familiarity, the lingering touches, the conference trips that somehow didn't match up to their itineraries. I'd let it all sit in silence like a pot on simmer. But now I turned up the flame. I didn't need spyware. Didn't need a hacker friend or keylogger. Just a locked drawer in my home office and access to publicly available reports, reimbursements, and my wife's carelessness. She'd once asked me to help her transfer photos off her work phone before she upgraded. AirDrop was too confusing, so she gave me the whole device. Just make sure nothing gets lost, she said. She had no idea what had already been found. Emails, Slack screenshots, an Uber receipt labeled client event from San Diego on a weekend where no client events were scheduled. 2 hotel charges posted 20 minutes apart, both under the company card, both for the same hotel, 2 rooms apart. One in Derek's name, one billed to hers. I printed them all, neatly, clean copies in a navy folder, labeled with the same precision she once mocked me for. Then came the messages. Can you book my room under your name again? Easier with your travel status. I'll pack your favorite wine. Don't forget the client development memo. I didn't need to add a single word of commentary. The context wrote itself. They'd underestimated the rules because they assumed no one was watching. But I wrote half the rules they were now violating. And the best part? The ones I didn't write, Elizabeth did. She texted me late that night after the gala. No greeting. No small talk. Just 3 words. I remember everything. The next morning, I began assembling the file. 1 section for expense violations. 1 for internal communication inconsistencies. 1 for possible HR-level misconduct under paragraphs 9, 10, and 11. Each section was color-coded, cross-referenced with dates, memos, signatures. I knew exactly how internal reviews worked. I'd helped design half their audit protocols. And most importantly, I knew which whistleblower protections were ironclad, which internal reporting structures bypassed legal, and how to present evidence that didn't look like a grudge, but a compliance concern. I wasn't framing them. I was just clarifying. And clarification, when applied surgically, doesn't leave room for defense. It leaves room for resignation. By the time I was done, the file wasn't just damning. It was elegant. That's the thing about seeds you plant years ago. They look like weeds to everyone else, until they blossom right beneath your enemy's feet. And by then, it's already too late to dig them out. It was one of those emails that lands like a grenade, sent at 7:42 a.m., timestamped just early enough to ruin a whole day. The subject line read, Inquiry on Mr. David Ellison. The sender? Marlene Hargrove, a board member with a reputation for devouring egos before lunch and filing the bones under governance review. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Can you confirm the man you were with last night is the same David Ellison formerly of Monroe and Brig LLP? Elizabeth read it twice. Then once more for punctuation. She typed back one word, confirmed. She didn't need to ask why. She knew. From that moment, it was like someone flipped a hidden switch. The gala jokes dried up. The group chats went silent. No more memes about office spouses. No more gifs of Derek winking during Zoom calls. One by one, the smirks were replaced by side glances. HR buzzed like a hornet's nest behind closed doors. Conversations started being held in supply closets again, just like back in 2008 when the firm purged 3 managers during the quiet ethics cleansing. Derek showed up late to work the next morning. First time in months. His tie was wrong, creased at the collar, not fully tightened. He carried his usual swagger like it had a limp. He passed by 2 coworkers at reception and flashed a brittle smile. Rough night? One asked. Just tired, he said. That was a lie. The truth was, his manager had called him the night before. Brief, cold. HR wants to see you tomorrow. 9 a.m., don't be late. And now, 9 a.m. sharp, Derek stood outside the HR conference room, fiddling with his phone like it might save him. But no messages. No missed calls from her. His golden girl. His co-conspirator. His ally. She wasn't responding. He knocked. A pause. Then the door opened. The room was too bright. The chairs too symmetrical. 1 woman from legal. 2 from HR. 1 he didn't recognize. External counsel, maybe. The kind they brought in when things needed to be done by the book. They didn't even offer coffee. On the table sat a sealed envelope with his name typed in bold. Subject line, pending review, interpersonal misconduct allegation. He opened it slowly, hands shaking. Inside was a list of flagged interactions, dates, Slack screenshots, travel reimbursements, and a summary of the firm's ethics code violations, with several clauses bolded and cross-referenced. One of them referenced paragraph 10, internal professional boundaries. He looked up. It's ridiculous. We were just friends. Everyone jokes. The woman from legal cut him off. We're not discussing guilt today, Mr. Adams. This is a notice of formal review. Your administrative access is suspended pending investigation. Please surrender your badge before you leave the building. I didn't, he caught himself. Didn't what? Didn't expense hotel rooms under false pretenses? Didn't send flirtatious messages on a platform that's auto-archived? Didn't behave inappropriately with a married colleague whose husband, as it turned out, helped write the very clause now circling his professional throat? They didn't need his admission. They had the receipts. And now, they had the trigger man. Derek stood, pale, his bravado leaking out of him like a deflated mascot suit. He left the room without speaking. Walked fast, head down. People turned to watch, but no one said a word. Not in that hallway. Not when a man was walking the Green Mile and still pretending it was just a hallway. He pulled out his phone again and texted her. Call me. Now. What's happening? I think it's bad. Really bad. No response. Not then. Not 15 minutes later. Not by noon. Because her phone, resting face down on her desk, was buzzing too. But not with his messages. With a calendar invite. Subject, compliance review interview, Catherine Ellison. The circle was tightening. And now, it was her turn in the chair. She came home late. Not, traffic was bad. Late, deliberately late. Like she'd sat in her car rehearsing her lines. Telling herself this conversation would be her stage. The door opened with a practiced sigh. Keys dropped too loudly into the bowl by the door. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights dimmed, same glass of scotch I'd poured 2 hours ago still untouched. She stood in the doorway like a prosecutor about to deliver closing arguments. "What did you do?" she asked, voice sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't flinch. I let the system you respect so much speak for itself. Her nostrils flared. "Don't play games with me." "I'm not," I said. "You already played them. I'm just letting the rules catch up." She walked over, heels echoing on the tile like a metronome ticking toward detonation. "This is because of him?" she hissed. "Because of a few jokes? Are you really that insecure?" Ah, there it was. The defense mechanism of cowards and manipulators alike. Reframe, belittle, deny. Insecure. I repeated. That's a funny word coming from someone who built her career off proximity to power and still thought sleeping with a middle manager would be an upgrade. That one landed. Her jaw tensed. "You're paranoid," she shot back. "You've always been jealous of my success. You couldn't handle me having a life outside your shadow." I stood and walked calmly to the desk drawer. Took out the folder I'd sealed earlier that day. No anger. No flourish. Just procedure. When I handed it to her, she didn't open it at first. Just held it like it might bite her. "What is this?" "Everything," I said. Inside were bank statements. Copies of transfers showing the separate accounts I'd moved my income into 6 months ago. A notarized letter severing financial interdependence. Credit card statements showing 0 shared purchases for the past quarter. A quitclaim deed, already signed, releasing my name from the home she claimed as her territory. And on top, a letter, cleanly typed, dated. No emotion in the wording, just finality. This letter serves as formal notice of the dissolution of all shared financial obligations between myself, David Ellison, and Catherine Ellison, effective immediately. She finally opened it. And when she did, her face dropped, not with confusion, but recognition. Like a magician realizing the audience already knew how the trick was done. "You're leaving me?" she whispered. "No," I said, with a quiet smile. "I'm just stepping out of your way. You made it clear that I was an accessory. A +1 at galas. A placeholder when your real life clocked out at 5. Well, now you get to see what life looks like without the placeholder." She gripped the counter, knuckles white. You're doing this now? When everything's falling apart at work. "Especially now," I said. "You tied your fortune to a man who couldn't read policy fine print. That's not my problem." Her voice cracked. "You can't just walk away." "I can, and I am. But not before I make sure I'm not collateral damage in whatever this implosion becomes." She slumped into a chair, folder open in her lap, reading through each document like she was flipping through a book she didn't write, but whose ending she hated. And then, barely above a whisper, "Why didn't you just talk to me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Talk to you? When you were too busy laughing at jokes made at my expense. When your loyalty evaporated the second someone made you feel seen in a conference room." "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "No," I replied. "You just didn't care if it did." We sat in silence for a while. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft shuffle of paper as she slowly, methodically, realized how much she'd gambled away. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't slam a door. Didn't demand an apology. Because when someone shows you what you mean to them, your job isn't to negotiate your worth. It's to exit the market entirely. And I'd just made my last transaction. The audit came fast, faster than even I expected. HR called it a routine internal compliance check, but everyone knew what it really was. A soft purge in business attire. The kind of operation that doesn't involve police, just lawyers in suits too expensive to wrinkle, asking questions like scalpels. Not to punish, to cut clean. It started with Derek. Naturally, the first red flag came from accounting. A string of expense reports spanning 6 months, each one with meals listed as client development. Problem was, the same 3 clients had already been confirmed as inactive during that period. And one of those dinners? A $312 seafood splurge at a restaurant in Chicago on a Saturday. The client listed? Retired. Lives in Florida. Didn't even attend the conference that week. But you know who did? My wife. The real nail in the coffin, though, came from photos. Not mine. Not screenshots or security footage. Just innocent uploads from team members on their social feeds. Hashtags like #CompanyFam, #WorkHardPlayHard, all paired with images of Derek and Catherine in poses a little too familiar. The kind of familiarity that HR refers to as compromising optics. And then there were the comments. Sarcastic, knowing ones from junior staff. When are these two getting a company-sponsored honeymoon? Just promote them both already. Clearly a power couple. Even one that said, "Still can't believe her husband lets this happen. What a chump." That one stuck. It said everything they thought, and everything she had let them believe. HR flagged it all. The dinners, the travel, the casual misconduct hiding in plain sight. The next summons didn't go to Derek. It went to her. The email landed at 11:12 a.m. Subject, compliance interview, attendance required. No pleasantries. No, we just want to chat. Just a time, a room number, and a reminder that legal would be present. She walked into the meeting wearing her usual armor, pressed blouse, clipped hair, that professional tone that dripped with artificial calm. But her posture gave her away. For the first time in years, she looked like someone who wasn't sure what script she was supposed to follow. HR didn't open with accusations. That's not how these things go. Instead, they laid out patterns, questioned dates, cross-referenced conference attendance with her calendar, asked her why she booked duplicate hotel rooms under separate accounts, why her travel card was used twice in the same location on weekends labeled as personal. And then came the kicker. This isn't just about Mr. Adams, said the HR head, flipping a page like it was just another day in the office. We've noticed discrepancies on your side as well. That's when the silence hit. You could hear her breath catch. Not loud, just enough to confirm what they suspected. She'd hoped they would stop at him, that she could play innocent, the helpful coworker who maybe blurred some lines, the victim of a charming manipulator. But they weren't buying it, because the paper trail didn't lie. The digital signatures, the co-signed dinners, the late-night Slack messages that started on project updates and ended with inside jokes about hotel minibars. She tried to explain. There was no intent to deceive. It was just convenient. He offered to manage the reservations, and, "Did you benefit personally from any of these arrangements?" One of the legal reps asked flatly. I didn't think of it that way. But it didn't matter what she thought, because what she was learning in real time is that intention isn't always the deciding factor. Perception is. And the perception now? She wasn't just adjacent to the mess. She was the mess. When she walked out of that room 47 minutes later, the hallway seemed longer. The stairs less friendly. No one said hello. No one offered a smile. The work wife, who used to hold court at happy hour, now she couldn't get eye contact. And Derek? He hadn't texted her once. Isolation doesn't announce itself with drama. It just settles in. One missed meeting at a time. One unanswered email. One teammate suddenly too busy for lunch. And as for me, I didn't say a word. She was finally feeling what I'd been living with for months. And we were only halfway down the slope. The moment the COO found out who I was, the energy in the entire building shifted. Not in a dramatic way. No slamming doors, no shouting matches. Just the kind of deep, sudden stillness that only happens when everyone simultaneously realizes they've miscalculated badly. It happened in a Tuesday morning executive meeting. Routine, supposedly. Weekly agenda, performance projections, risk audits. The kind of thing most execs sleepwalk through while pretending to care about departmental KPIs. But then Marlene, the same board member who'd emailed Elizabeth, spoke up. "Before we move on," she said, flipping her tablet around, "a clarification. Can someone explain why no one informed leadership that the individual named in this ongoing misconduct review, David Ellison, is married to Catherine Ellison?" The room went quiet. The COO, James Whitaker, blinked. "David Ellison? As in Monroe and Brigg?" Marlene nodded. "As an ex-senior counsel, consultant, and, incidentally, one of the original legal architects of our internal compliance protocols." Another silence. Heavier this time. Whitaker looked around the table. Why didn't anyone tell me David Ellison was her husband? Someone near the end of the table, a junior exec from marketing, mumbled. He introduced himself as just Dave at the last charity event. Said he used to work in construction law, I think. That earned him a look from Marlene that could have withered steel. Whitaker leaned back, exhaled through his nose like a man who'd just realized his office was sitting on a fault line. And nobody thought to vet that. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to legal. "I want a full review of every document connected to this. Tonight, I want the names of everyone who reviewed the last 3 expense reports from both employees. I want to know why we're just now learning that the man married to a senior employee has been sitting on whistleblower-level evidence for months." Legal nodded. One of the partners already had a laptop open. And just like that, I went from that guy who sometimes shows up at events to a name no one wanted to say out loud. My resume, which had once gathered dust by design, was now being read aloud in boardrooms. Line by line, every firm I'd touched, every settlement I'd negotiated, every clause I'd written. They realized something else, too, quietly and collectively. It wasn't scandal for scandal's sake. I hadn't leaked photos. I hadn't published a Medium post. I wasn't ranting on LinkedIn. I hadn't even hired a lawyer. I didn't need to, because what I had were facts. Clean, annotated, cross-referenced. A blueprint of misconduct tucked inside neat manila folders, handed over with no drama. And that scared them more than any social media tantrum ever could. Because people who make noise usually want attention. But people who move in silence, they want outcomes. And I wanted very specific outcomes. Which is why, when the company's internal counsel reached out off the record to discuss informal mediation options, I declined. Politely. Efficiently. No emotion in the reply. I prefer that the documents speak for themselves. Behind closed doors, they began settlement talks. Quiet ones. Preemptive ones. They weren't worried about Derek anymore. His exit was inevitable. The real fear was Catherine. Because if her financial ties were already severed, if her husband was legally insulated, if the documents proved she knowingly participated in misconduct, then the company wasn't just looking at an HR scandal. They were looking at exposure. So they did what companies do when they're scared. They circled the wagons. Legal ran point. PR drafted contingency statements. And in hushed tones, executives started asking the same question. How did we miss him? The answer was simple. They never looked. They were too busy laughing at Derek's jokes. Too busy treating Catherine like she was invincible. Too busy writing me off as a tag-along husband with nothing but free time and polite smiles. Now, I wasn't dismissed anymore. I was feared. And fear, in a room full of executives, is the only language they actually understand. The boardroom was colder than usual. Not because of the AC, though it was blasting, but because of the silence. Thick. Surgical. The kind that signals decisions have already been made, and now the execution is just a formality. No one smiled. No one cracked a joke. Even the assistant who usually brought coffee with a nervous grin had left it by the door and vanished like she didn't want to be tied to any of this. At the head of the table sat Whitaker, the COO. Next to him were two external compliance officers. Across from them, legal. And beside them, a chair left deliberately empty, Derek's. He arrived 7 minutes late. No tie. Jacket wrinkled. A tremble in his hand when he placed his phone face down on the table. "Thank you for joining us," Whitaker said, tone flat. No one returned pleasantries. There were no handshakes. "I've reviewed the report," Whitaker continued, "including expense records, Slack logs, travel inconsistencies, and statements from multiple team members." Derek opened his mouth to speak, but a glance from one of the legal advisors shut him up. "We're not here to debate facts," she said. That's when the HR director slid a white envelope across the table toward Derek. "Your resignation. Pre-drafted. Severance offer included. Signing is voluntary, but refusal triggers an immediate ethics board inquiry." He didn't reach for it. Just stared. "Catherine?" Whitaker asked. She was already seated, but looked like she might fall out of the chair. Not dressed for this. Not in the bright blazer she'd once called her power move armor. "No mascara today. Just foundation and fear. We're placing your title on administrative hold," he said. "Effective immediately. Your team will report to Interim Director Morales until the review is complete. This is non-negotiable." She didn't nod, didn't argue, just stared at the surface of the table like it might open up and swallow her whole. At the far end of the room, I sat quietly, not at the main table, just at the consultant's chair in the back, where external advisors usually sit unnoticed, if they're lucky. But today, I was very much noticed. Whitaker turned his gaze to me, and for the first time in 3 years, he addressed me directly in front of the full board. We should have paid more attention. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just met his eyes and replied, calm and dry. "You're not the only ones who didn't." And that was the kill shot. Not a threat, not a victory lap, just a truth that landed harder than any accusation. Because everyone in that room understood what I meant. Catherine hadn't paid attention either, not to the man beside her, the one she left off invitations and out of conversations. She didn't notice when the shared credit cards stopped syncing, when my name vanished from her travel insurance, or when my LinkedIn reactivated quietly after 5 years of silence. She didn't ask why I'd booked a business class ticket alone to New York last month, or why I came back with a new consulting agreement from Kane Strategic Advisors, signed and sealed by Elizabeth herself. She didn't see any of it, until it was too late. Back in the boardroom, Derek still hadn't signed. He looked around the room for a lifeline. No one met his eye, not even Catherine. Finally, with a twitch in his jaw, he picked up the pen and scribbled his name at the bottom of the page. He slid it back, stood, and left without a word. The door closed behind him with a gentle click. That was all. No outbursts. No meltdown. But his career? Already a smoldering ruin. Catherine sat motionless. And me? I quietly collected my folder, nodded once, and left the room. Not a hero. Not a villain. Just the man no one saw coming until he held the whole deck in his hands. The call came at 10:04 p.m. I saw the name flash across my screen, Catherine, mobile, and let it ring until the last second before answering. Not because I was unsure, just because silence unsettles people like her. Makes them second-guess how much power they ever actually had. Her voice was cracked, like it had been doing battle with tears for hours. "David," she said. Just my name. Like that was enough to rewind a year of betrayal. I didn't say anything. Let her fill the void. "I lost everything," she whispered. "Everything." Still, I waited. "My title's gone. They're putting me on a formal leave. No pay. No exit package. HR said the review will take months. The board won't even speak to me without counsel present now. And Derek," she laughed, dry and broken. "He's disappeared. Stopped returning my calls. My God, I don't even know where he's staying." I could picture it perfectly. Her sitting in the home we used to share, surrounded by framed conference photos and empty glasses. The silence in that house louder than any apology she could muster. "You were willing to lose me for a fantasy," I said finally. "Now you've lost the fantasy too." She inhaled sharply like that line hit her chest. Like she hadn't fully realized until this moment that the fire she helped start had burned every possible exit. "I didn't mean." "You did," I said. "You just thought no one would ever call you on it. That I'd keep being the quiet husband in the corner while you played office queen and passed me over for a man whose idea of power was billing lobster under client development." "I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, David, tell me what I'm supposed to do." I almost felt something. Pity maybe. But it passed. "Clean up," I said. "Alone. Like you wanted." And I hung up. No screaming. No last jabs. Just the final dial tone of a chapter one had closed long before she realized the book was ending. That same hour, on the other side of town, Derek received his letter. Official. Stamped. Delivered by courier. From the National Ethics Oversight Committee. 3 pages of findings. Violations. Witness statements. Financial misconduct. Unprofessional conduct across 3 separate incidents. Final line, bold and clean. "You are hereby barred from future employment in any firm bound by our professional conduct agreements, effective immediately." No appeals. No mercy. Just black ink and the end of a career he built on arrogance and assumption. I didn't see his reaction. Didn't need to. The outcome was already part of the plan. Meanwhile, my plane was boarding. A red-eye to Seattle. Quiet flight. A new city. A new contract. Elizabeth had offered a strategic advisory role, part-time, high pay, 0 visibility. Just the way I liked it. I walked through the terminal calmly. No calls to make. No bags to drag behind me. My new apartment was already waiting. Utilities set. Key code texted 2 days earlier. My consulting retainer wired and cleared. All of it done without drama. Without vengeance porn. No messy online post. No tell-all email chain. Just clean exits. And wreckage I didn't bother to look back at. The world behind me, burned and silent. But ahead, a quieter life. And this time, no one would mistake my silence for weakness again.